Thanks for tuning in and welcome to this week's review of Hostel Part 2 starring Eli Roth Gorefest, presented by Quentin Tarantino. Whatever that means.
Jedes Jahr werden in Amerika 10.000 Menschen mit einer Schusswaffe getötet. Darüber hinaus werden über 2.000 Menschen erstochen. Amerikaner haben einfach keine Fantasie. Hostel Teil 2.
Okay, first off, we all need to ask this question. What does Quentin Tarantino Presents actually mean? He's obviously one of the executive producers of the movie, but I cannot really recall any other executive producer getting this kind of publicity. And most people think the whole QT Presents thing is just a way to leech off his name, knowing that if you're associated with him, that you may be able to gain some of his viewers. I'm not real fond of this practice of using his name to promote a movie. I love Quentin Tarantino as a writer, director, and producer, but I'm just not sure if I like him using his name like this. It may be a little bit misleading to the actual extent of his involvement in the movie to some people. I must be honest about Hostel Part 2. If I was not doing these movie reviews for my subscribers, I probably wouldn't have seen this one in the theater. I actually do own the first one on DVD and thought it was interesting enough to watch when it first came out. I guess you could say morbid curiosity did get the best of me. If you've been watching most of my movie reviews, you know that I'm not a huge gore fan, so this really isn't my ideal movie to watch in my free time. To make a second film with the same bondage torture theme just seemed like it was not really making a point or exposing that this is happening somewhere, but just an excuse to show people getting tortured and killed for nothing more than a way to exploit a twisted taboo for a quick buck. And some of you may not know this, but this is not a total fabrication of a story. Here's what Eli Roth said about doing his research for the original movie, Hostel.
It's a story based on true events.
Yeah, the whole impetus of the film, it came from these events that I read about in Thailand. Where American businessmen and European businessmen would go over there and really poor and dirt poor people would sell members of their family to organized crime, and businessmen would pay $10,000 to go into a room and shoot them in the head. And so I wanted to do a documentary about it and quickly realized that the more research I did, the more dangerous it got. Like, you never find the people that were actually involved and you get killed. So Mike Fleiss and Chris Briggs, the producers, were saying that they wanted to do a movie about backpackers. They're just a movie set in that world that we could shoot somewhere overseas. And so I thought about it, and I thought, this would actually be a perfect way to kind of combine the two and to work that idea into the narrative story.
Now, if this isn't disturbing, I don't know what is. I will say I like the first one enough to buy it, and I did like the beginning of the second one as well. I like when the sequel has the character from the first one and the second one to give it some sort of continuation. Otherwise, just make a different movie. There are not too many dull moments in this movie, but the only real glitch to it is that you've pretty much seen it all before. There's really not anything new from this movie other than the fact that instead of having 3 horny young men, they use 3 young girls. They have the token homely girl along with 2 pretty ones. The casting is both good and bad. The supporting actors are cast far better than the main characters. The smaller roles and extras look authentic, which does help the look and feel of the movie and does capture the European feel as well. The problem with the casting is they make the homely bookworms character so pathetic. Could they put more of a stereotype person in there? And I always hate when the pathetic, helpless characters are in these movies, because there has to be one in every horror movie, but they need to lighten it up just a little bit. That character to me is like the Jar Jar Binks of horror movies and needs to be killed off mercifully before the movie even starts. The worst thing about the horror genre is that they know all they need to do for the most part is kill people in semi-creative ways, and they don't really have to concentrate on proving the story or the plot as much as they should. They figure people just want to see people killed, so why bother spending countless hours making sure the story is good? This is why most horror movies fall short of $50 million. The R rating doesn't help either, but they don't really have a lot of staying power. The die-hard horror fan will watch, but there's really nothing there for the casual horror fan. They'll just wait and see it on DVD later. One of the biggest strengths of this sequel is it does have pretty strong continuity between the first installment and the sequel. There are several aspects of the film that do carry over nicely into this one. The one thing I notice about Eli Roth movies is he does tend to hold your hand a little bit while watching a movie. There is a character with a mouthful of chiclets, and for those of you who have no idea what that means, it just means he's got some big old teeth on him. This is his way of making sure the next time you see him you go, he was the guy who... He did the same thing in the first movie for the guy who sets the first group of boys up to be killed. He had a huge fake mole on him, so later on in the movie you can remember him. And I can appreciate that he wants you to remember who he is, but he needs to find a little better way of doing it. The pacing of the movie was pretty good. There's not too many lulls in it, and as you must have guessed, this does have a decent amount of gore in it, but it just didn't seem nearly as brutal as the first one. This one was kind of like Hostel light. This one did have a different feel than the first one, and really the first one, the tone just was much more serious. This one had more of an over-the-top feel, not quite Kill Bill Lucy Liu style blood, but definitely over the top, taking you a little further away from the reality that the first one had accomplished. The execution of the movie and the storyline is okay, but maybe this could be likened a little bit to the Jaws franchise. And now, there is no comparison to the quality of Jaws as a movie and Hostel as a movie, other than the fact that by the time Jaws 3, 4, and 5 came out, there was really nothing more to the movie than a shark eating people, and it had no real other point than that. If they make more of these movies, it will likely have the same fate. But if they can make a Saw 4, they can certainly make a Hostel 3 and 4. And the law in Hollywood is there'll be sequels until the franchise becomes non-profitable. And that's the only time Hollywood backs away, is when a franchise is broke, not dead. The ending was somewhat predictable, and I knew it really could only go in two different directions in the end. And there was a little bit of a twist at the end of the movie, but hardly anything that was original or memorable. And when it happened, I was pretty much like, I figured that'd be the case. The very end of the movie was very campy, and it ended on a completely different note than the first installment. It was almost upbeat. Not really sure why they chose this direction, but I'm sure there will eventually be a Hostel 3. But I'm not sure I'm going to watch the same movie again for the third time. 2 times was more than enough. I actually like Eli Roth. He seems like a pretty cool guy with some real talent and direction in the biz, but he does need to spread his wings a little bit and broaden his horizon before this is all he's known for. And I know it's hard to come up with original stories for movies these days, but the Hostel franchise needs to have its time in the chamber and be put to rest, like all its victims. From overall rating, I give Hostel Part 2 2.5 stars.